Hey everybody, it's great to see you all virtually. My name is Sophie and this is a free webinar on the concept and the practice and the set of tools to create breakthroughs around hindered idealism. So this webinar is called Hindered Idealism, a workshop on strategic mentorship for innovation and systems change, brought to you by Widespread Wellness Consulting. And it is designed to give you some tools to potentially implement in your own life or use with your students, all around this idea of hindered idealism, which we will get right into now. Okay, so a little bit of a quick introduction of myself. Like I said, my name is Sophie Nathanson. I am a medical sociologist, which means that I study the health of entire populations of people in order to learn more about the society in which they live in. So the application of that has to do with the new field of population health management, which is all about understanding how to study the health of groups of people and ideally improve the health of populations. So this is a field that is within the healthcare system and other sectors of society that are dedicated to keeping people healthy and well and addressing things at more of a group level. So I teach medical sociology as well as population health. I started one of the first population health management bachelor's programs in the country. And there I started a research center along with my students who did most of the work. And a lot of the lessons that I've learned has come from being a social researcher in a local community and connecting the local with the global trends that we are seeing around health and wellness. And I am also the owner at Widespread Wellness Consulting, which is a passion project that hopefully will one day grow into a business of many consultants that can connect with people all over the world who want to address social problems and really address things that are happening at a big picture level, but need some tools to navigate all of the barriers that you go through in order to make a larger impact. So that's a little bit about me. And in today's workshop, I'm going to be connecting sociology, which if you have taken a sociology class, you may already know this, but sociology is really just the study of society. So everything that we're talking about here can be applied to other disciplines. Since I'm a sociologist, I use the sociological imagination, that perspective, to understand problems and create solutions within society when it comes to issues that affect a group of people. And sociology is one of those majors in college that a lot of people think you can't get a job with sociology. And it's one of the many majors that really provides you with an excellent toolkit, but there's not often a lot of scaffolding to get you out into the job market. So we're going to tie together sociology, innovation, something that I call strategic mentorship, which is a little bit like coaching, where you have a specific strategy to the type of mentorship and support that you can give other people, for example, your students or your clients. And we're going to talk about the most common pain points of sort of idealistic systems changer folks. So the people that have a lot of ideas and a lot of ideas of how they can make things better. There are many challenges to being a person like this. And so if you can relate to some of these pain points, I'm hoping that you will get something out of it that you can also apply in your own life. So we will be talking about different tools that you can use in the classroom, on yourself, with your clients, to kind of navigate some of the potential barriers in engaging in systems change and other activities. So again, we'll talk about the challenges, the pain points, things that our students and our clients will run into throughout their career, especially early on in their career, and then we'll get into some activities that you can do. So sociological training is a set of tools in which you use those tools to understand the bigger picture. And social science, if you've heard of psychology, anthropology, sociology, economics, political science, those are all social sciences, and they are studies of human behavior. They study different aspects of human behavior. Sociologists tend to study the infrastructure of societies and social systems and how they're built and how they affect people. That type of research can really be leveraged to test out innovations and to create social change, even to design new products and address other problems like that. But a lot of people do not get the training in how to connect sociology with innovation, or how to navigate some of the more interpersonal and psychological challenges that you may have if you have that big picture view and you're trying to make changes even at a micro level. There are a lot of barriers in implementation that don't always get addressed. You can think about it as learning about society and all the problems and kind of the potential solutions. That tends to be a little bit abstract. So how do we bring it back to how does thinking like that and some of the research tools relate to different careers that you can have, and how can you make that work within our present societal conditions, which are rapidly changing? So the concept of hindered idealism, I'm going to go back a sec, is really the experience of feeling held back, not because you don't have ideas for what you could do, but because you may have too many ideas. You may be held back by your social environment. You may have your own shortcomings, which we all do. And so it's this point of tension where you have ideas, but there's something about your environment, whether it be external or internal, where you can't make progress. And I'm sure many of you might be able to relate to this. So in talking about mentorship versus teaching versus coaching, what are we really talking about? Well, as teachers, we can disseminate knowledge, right? But as mentors and coaches, if we can take the time to create an environment where people are sort of strong enough and open enough to take feedback, we can really push and challenge and help people bust through blocks in their inner and outer environment. And this is very different than getting information. When it comes to behavior change in the health world, and really in any case, we have a lot of information out there. We also have some misinformation out there that's becoming more and more of a problem. But no matter what, knowledge is not usually the only piece of the puzzle when it comes to behavior change. A lot of us, for example, know what we need to do to be healthy or even to advance our careers, but that's simply not the problem. And so when we get into the solution side, simply giving people information and ideas is not going to work for most people that have become sort of creatively blocked or suffer from any of these hindrances. So in the systems change world, which I'm not going to go too much into systems change, but our social systems are things like the system of government, religion, education, our whole political system, the criminal justice system, the family system. All of these systems, they relate to some of the problems that we can analyze and investigate in our society. And if you are trying to impact a population and there are systems level problems, we need to engage in systems change. Now, to engage in systems change, even at a micro level, meaning more of, let's say, an organizational level, changes within the family, changes within your small business, all the way up to the macro level, changes in global society. Well, no matter what level you're at, there are some challenges that most people will run into. And so this is from the Stanford Innovation Review. They talk about people having unease with really zooming out. If you zoom out so far that you see these huge problems, sometimes it can be crushing as far as thinking about how we can ever make changes. There are other issues like people making too many assumptions, a lack of humility, thinking that people are stupid because they behave in a certain way and not really getting past that as far as what would actually work to create changes. People can be resistant to plans. You can overuse tools. You can get pilotitis where you're doing all these pilot projects and you're not really able to scale things out or scale things up. You could be suffering from preordained solutions that don't work in a certain area. There are power imbalances, right? If you want to make changes and you want to get everybody's viewpoint, that is hard work, and there are certain people and entities that have more power than others, and that becomes a serious issue. You can have an over-reliance on scholarship. You can not engage enough sort of external actors, meaning people that are outside your scope of where you want to influence things. You can over-measure. You can have a lack of context where you're measuring things, but you don't really know the backstory or all the other dynamics. You could rely on simply quantitative metrics instead of getting a lot of really in-depth viewpoints from people. All of these are the things that, you either shouldn't do or can become problems with systems change. So some of the tools that I'm going to teach you and kind of deliver so that you can put your own spin on it have to do with these types of challenges. So what are the goals that we have for our students and our clients? If you are a mentor or a coach, or you have a business where you're dedicating yourself to helping people, this goes especially for the people serving occupations, teachers, healthcare workers, counselors, people in social services, and everything in between. We want our people to have job satisfaction. That is a huge indicator of quality of life. And yes, that does include having a job or having a purpose, having a place to volunteer, having some kind of activity that you do where other people are sort of relying on you in some way. This could be anything, meaningful work. And for social science folks, that means being able to apply sociology or whatever the social science is to their job. There have been studies on people that major in things like sociology, and one of the main variables in their job satisfaction is their ability to actually take what they learned and apply it in their job. Number two, social support, people finding their tribe. And the flip side of that is being immersed in a population that has a lot of diversity. The phrase find your tribe simply means your ability to seek out and get support from people that have some level of understanding of you and vice versa. So this obviously can reach social bounds. Having healthy work relationships, that's huge. Number three, a sense of achievement, a sense of accomplishment. And this doesn't mean that you win awards or you make tons of money. This is more of a feeling that we want people to have a sense of. You can be a workaholic and you can produce all sorts of things and not have that sense of achievement. And we'll talk about why a little bit later. And that leads us to the last goal in this kind of generic set of goals for the people that we want to support: mental health, self-esteem, self-efficacy, well-being. Too much of these things are not taught either with knowledge or experientially throughout our entire schooling, and for many of us, even in our own families. So being able to cultivate all of these things like self-esteem and self-efficacy are absolutely critical if you want to grow as a professional, if you want to take feedback and integrate that. So these are the goals that are overarching this set of challenges and solutions that we'll talk about. So getting into the first of the four most common hindrances that I've seen with young professionals and seasoned professionals alike that hit these roadblocks, people that are idealistic about how the world could be better, and they run into these barriers. And the first one that we often run into is being hindered by the job market. So if you're passionate about your college major, but you can't integrate it in your career, if you feel like you have a certain set of skills, but you're finding it hard to match that with the outside job market, if you're feeling like you need to completely shift and learn something entirely new that might not even be your passion, there is a lot of hype around following your passion, and that's not what this is about. This is about being able to strategically match what you are interested in and do well with what's out there. A lot of this is all about building a bridge and making a connection. It's not black and white thinking. It's not either or. It's not make money or be passionate. None of those things. So this is a very, very common roadblock that people get, especially that are very excited about what they do and can't necessarily find a niche. And if you think about at the entry level, if you're somebody that wants to make big changes, you're not going to likely be able to do that right away. And so what does it look like to get started and then build towards being able to make changes? And a lot of times I hear that by the time people get to the C-level and the vice president level where they can make changes, they are socialized so much into that system that it's way more difficult to make system change than it even would be when you're starting out and you're seeing all these glaring inconsistencies and things that can be done better because you're an outsider when you're starting out. So how do we manage this one? We'll talk about that in a moment. The second one is being hindered by the paradigm. Now, there are a lot of debates around about, are we becoming a more polarized society in America and globally, or was it always like this? And I've heard a lot of really interesting arguments on all sides, but this is a common feeling, and it's also a tangible, practical challenge where you feel that the very paradigm that is overshadowing the work that you do is not aligned with how you feel it should be, or you have colleagues that don't see the world as you do, and this can feel disheartening. This can cause a lot of interpersonal conflict. And we are in the midst of paradigm changes. We have a lot of social movements happening all around the world. If you look, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, our whole society is becoming more comfortable with some things, less comfortable with other things. Things are coming to the head. There's more conversation about racism and sexism, and all of those underlying issues are really coming to the surface. And during the pandemic, especially early days when everyone was sort of locked down and tuning into the same topic all around the world, really getting in sync, a lot of these issues that were brought up that people have been talking about for a very, very long time, people were tuned in on a level that we have not necessarily experienced before as a collective society. So this idea of paradigm clash is very real, but there's also a huge opportunity to have paradigm shifts happen. The third hindrance in hindered idealists is being hindered by bureaucracy, having good ideas and coming right up against a time barrier, a paperwork barrier, a barrier that has to do with the administrators, or maybe you are an administrator and don't have a certain amount of social or cultural power to get something done, red tape, and this starts to drain on your motivation. A lot of my students that got into the job market and they had different ideas, and when they kind of realize the bureaucracy and how much time it takes, that can feel very slow and disheartening, and it can do something to you mentally. So this is another one to be on the lookout for. And the last one, probably the most important one, being hindered by yourself. And as a sociologist, I really do see things at a multifactorial level, we'll say. So anything that's happening to you as an individual. There is a thread where you have your biology, your genetics, your neuroscience, your family, your community, your society, the media. We have so many variables acting on ourselves that when you have something that is truly an inside job, that doesn't mean that it completely originates within you. A lot of our psychological problems are very socially patterned, and there's a lot of aspects of our culture and our social structure that lead to those problems that then we must deal with as individuals. So being someone who has a lot of ideas but cannot seem to make progress, or you suffer from depression, anxiety, any kind of mental health condition, you don't feel like you're working on things sustainably, you are oscillating between superiority, inferiority, just not feeling that sustainable progress feeling, and knowing that it is something that somehow originates within you, yet at the same time is related to what's going on with all of us, that's something that we want to get the tools to navigate. So starting with the first one of being hindered by the job market, we want to ask the question, how can we use our education to shape our career? It doesn't mean a degree. Now, we are a credential society, so in a lot of cases, you do need to get a certain degree to get a certain job. But when it comes to this hindrance, your education is everything that you have done or everything that has happened to you. There is not really a way to not use the things that you've learned from your experiences. Anything that you do, you are applying what you learned in the past. And so we want to do this with the language that is going to make sense to whoever is going to hire you. So this is just an example of jobs that have nothing to do with sociology or social science in the title. And again, I'm coming from a social science background, psychology, anthropology, sociology, economics. There are a host of other disciplines that also create graduates that face struggles in the job market. And so this is about looking at jobs, and this is particularly true for if you're mentoring younger people, to think about things as you're not always going to find what you want in the job title, and that looking deeper into the job descriptions and thinking about what you can do in those terms and making that connection becomes really important. So these are different types of jobs that my former students have done that don't have anything to do with sociology. There's pretty much no verbiage that has to do with their major in the job ad, but they absolutely have the skill set for these types of jobs. So in the classroom, if you are a social science teacher or really any kind of teacher or professor, you can do even a very brief job search of what's going on in your area. And this is true even if you are a business owner. I mean, it really doesn't matter. This applies to any professional. And by professional, I just mean someone that is out there trying to provide some kind of value in exchange for some kind of capital. And so we can take just that small step that can make such a big difference, understand what's out there. As somebody that I went to a good school, I had a great college education, but nowhere in that education, there may have been a job fair, but I did not understand or learn anything about the career world around me. That was not baked into my education, and that's the case for a lot of people. As an activity that you can do, find a job that is of interest to analyze in relation to your skills in sociology or whatever your background is. Maybe you majored in fine art or literature or something like that, and map your skills, your understanding of, for example, social systems or whatever the core of your education was, into the experience of doing the job. So this takes some imagination. You really need to start to imagine as you read that job description what it would be like to do that job. And for social scientists, our ability to think beyond the walls of wherever we work, or maybe it's remotely, but as a metaphor, to think beyond at the larger social trends and the things that are happening in society and in local communities and in other occupations and organizations, understanding how that affects what you are doing with your work, that's huge for anyone that's in a field that has any inclination to do systems change or to make a difference or to shift things in any way. Someone's ability to see the larger picture and be able to integrate that is huge. And this is something that is very intimidating, and it may come off as too much if you tell an employer, hey, I want to make systems changes. It's not about that. It's about thinking about the skill set of seeing those systemic issues in the case of sociology and integrating that into the job. So what this could look like is you can start to analyze the job, and these are just some questions that you can be asking. What's the title? What's the field? What are 3 larger issues that could impact the field? So let's say that you are applying to be a high school teacher at an alternative school. Based on the job description in the local area, what are 3 things that are going on in that community? What are the economics like? What are the environmental issues like? What other organizations have stood out or have initiatives going in the community or are communicating anything with the community? Read the local newspaper. I mean, these are things that don't take very long, but you can show that you understand the environment and that there are things out there that you can connect to, even outside of what you're doing in your job. This is what systems change and making a bigger difference is all about. It's all about seeing the environment around you and being able to somehow integrate that into what you're doing on the day-to-day. So yes, you have to have the skills to do the day-to-day job, but if you're a social scientist, you have this frame of mind. There are so many times where I've heard people, oh, I majored in anthropology, but I don't use that in my job. I would be surprised if you don't. And so this is how we can connect those dots. Other questions you could ask: what are some potential problems that you would deal with in that position? Most of us get asked how we navigate conflict in work situations. So, get a jump on that. What are sociological methods to research the problem, or anthropological methods? I know several anthropologists that ended up working in healthcare, and they can articulate some of the ethnographic methods that they use. People that I know that are business consultants and use different social science methodologies to collect information that is vital to that business moving forward. The deliverable with this set of tools is a tailored resume and a cover letter, which many of us have done before. This is all a manufactured pretend thing, but this is somebody that is a recent sociology graduate in this imaginatory example, and they are a social analyst because they majored in sociology, and they are a health advocate because they participate in initiatives that have to do with health. Right then and there, that is very different than just saying that you got a bachelor's in sociology, which some people may not even know what that is. So it's being able to, it's more than branding yourself. I know that's kind of probably not what a lot of people want to hear, but it is being bold enough to and open-minded enough to use different words to describe your skill set and yourself in ways that are going to make sense and resonate with the folks that you ideally want to work with. Remember, you're interviewing them too. So you can pause the webinar and read this to learn different ways to articulate sociology skills, for example, in this example. Moving on to being hindered by the paradigm. Now, this could be any paradigm. This could be, thinking about how schools don't always focus on relationships and understanding trauma. It could be that healthcare doesn't always focus on prevention and social determinants of health. It could be that business doesn't always focus on the environment. Something where there's kind of a paradigm clash, where you've got the values or the way things are with the way things could be, and there's a mismatch there. So how can we manage working with other people that maybe don't see things in that bigger picture? Now, I'll get right to the chase. This is not about getting people to think like you do. I don't actually recommend doing that. But here are some examples of paradigm clashes. City projects, gentrification versus local culture, healthcare, biomedical view versus social determinants, academics, applied, career focused versus the liberal arts, well-rounded. And if you're thinking it's not an either or thing, I 1000% agree with you. It's not an either or thing, but you will still find potentially that there are these paradigm clashes. And so how do we navigate through this so that it doesn't become an either or, an us versus them? Us versus them, either or situations are very stagnant. All right, so in the classroom, you can be talking about what paradigms are, really leaning into discussing the relationship between sociology and politics. This has come up many, many times in my career, and I admit I have really shied away from anything that could be controversial or political, which was not necessarily the way to go, but I had to do a lot of growing and learning to be able to really manage to take on different topics and explain things in ways that were more expansive than just looking at things from an academic perspective. For example, sociologists are often labeled as liberal people, and that's not always the case. But part of the reason for that is that in sociology, we study differences between groups. We end up studying inequality. And if you're studying inequality and you want to do something about that and translate that, then you're getting into politics, meaning there are very different ways of viewing what we could do to, let's say, reduce that inequality. And there are also people that do not want to reduce the inequality. So it's really in the application that it gets political, but that is something that we absolutely need to be talking about long before people get into situations where there's a paradigm clash or a political clash. So a couple of different activities here, because this is such an important one, especially in our polarized environment. Number one, humility check. That is absolutely imperative before you go any further. If you're in a situation where you feel like people don't get it, I've had people come to me and say, this person, this entity doesn't get it, and we need to collect data and show them what it's like and how it is and how things are. And to that, I say that I'm not confident that that strategy will work. And the reason for that is when it comes to human behavior, and many of you have probably heard this or read research having to do with when people get data that is against what they think, people tend to actually think what they think stronger, and they don't swap for the new data. That's not typically how people's psychology works. So the first thing is to kind of clear yourself of the potential antagonistic energy that you might bring to the table. After you do that, it becomes easier to see what people's roles are. It's too much of a burden to take on changing everyone's view around you. I'm not saying that's not a noble cause in many cases, but it is a really heavy burden. And so if you look at this holistically and you care about your own wellness and your self-care and the sustainability of your mind and your body and your relationships, taking on that burden is a huge, huge risk. And so rather than doing that, we can start to see, oh, right, these people, they have this agenda, these people, they have that agenda. And so if our overarching goal is to improve the lives of people and to make positive change, then how can we more strategically work together? And it really comes down to what works, what is actually going to move the needle further, and where we want to put our energy, because this is exhaustive work. Okay, so getting into action, some of the questions that you can think about when you do the humility check are, what emotions come up when I think about this person, organization, situation? That feeling of, let's say it's anger, let's say it's inferiority, let's say it's nervousness, let's say it's fear. We don't get a lot of education and training in how to talk about our emotions and be in touch with it. So if you have no idea, then you are like a lot of us. But that is a good starting place because it draws your attention on what's happening with you. And that is a very good lifelong skill, because oftentimes we are so focused on the external, whether it's something to validate us or something that we want to change, that we end up getting further and further away from the internal changes that we really need to make if we are aiming for sustainable progress. If we want something done in a month's time and we don't care what it's going to cause us health-wise, then we don't have to do this. But this is really a long game approach. So what is my biggest fear with regards to the situation? Now, this is something that you're doing on your own. It's not something that you need to share with anybody. It's simply something to consider. What is the fear behind this? You know, it could be, I have a fear of looking bad in front of my colleagues. I have a fear of what people may think if I work with this person that doesn't share my values. I have a fear that people are going to die or they're going to get sick. I have a fear that I'm going to get sick or die. I mean, there's so many different fears. It could be anything for you, but that's something to get onto the table. What is a specific situation or conversation that's running through your mind? If you can really, instead of push it down, but actually kind of look closer at a dynamic or a conversation that you've had either in your head or with somebody else, think about what you would have done different in one of those situations and why. It is very hard to change other people, almost impossible. You can be influential, you can lead by example. There are ways to do it. But if you think about why the other person / organization may feel the way that they do, what their primary motivation is, your first answer, they want to make money. They want to look good. They want to have power. They want to maintain their power. You know, you've got your first thought. Well, then come up with 3 alternative explanations for their position. This is all about perspective, and it's not about putting out the flame of your passion or changing your own mind. That's why this can feel scary. It's not about silencing yourself or, you know, softening your edges so that you come off a certain way. It's really not about that. It's about clarifying your ultimate goal and then doing what you need to do for your own psychological well-being and clarity so that you can have constructive relationships. So this leads to your potential next right thing, an action item for your team. You could have a mini script for interactions. People may say, well, if I script it out, then that's not going to be authentic. Well, the thing is, when it comes to our initial reactions with people that may not see things the same way that we do, we have these initial responses, and those are based on protecting ourselves. And in some cases, it's based on things that happened to us long ago. And all through our childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, we learn certain things to cope with our situation, to survive and thrive, to protect ourselves. And so when you start trying to act differently or take a different approach, that may actually feel like you're going to die because you've learned these survival mechanisms and now you're doing something different. So it may feel bad. So the idea to script something or to have a few things in mind to say, like, can we set a time to talk more on this? It may feel uncomfortable, but it's not necessarily inauthentic. And if it does feel, we have to parse out being inauthentic and being uncomfortable and doing something different. And those are two different things. So that's something to meditate on. So doing a personal inventory, this is just on the left, the responses to the questions on the slide before. So I'm afraid of this. I am replaying when I may have interrupted and I wish I hadn't done that. And some of the alternative explanations are they may not be for this project because it's not in their wheelhouse. They may not have resources. People may not have the professional self-esteem to take on projects. And that doesn't mean that they don't feel like there should be something done when it comes to a social issue or something that you may be passionate about and trying to accomplish. And then the second part of the toolbox for dealing with being hindered by the paradigm is a model, or even if it's just a mental model of how you can work within this system. Even when you're in an area where people have very different political ideas. In my experience, working in communities where there are people that have very different political orientations at the table, it is shocking to many people that there's actually a lot of agreement on the ideal outcome. For example, we want fewer children to be abused. We want fewer people to be without food to eat. We want more young people to finish high school. We want to see lower crime. Those types of outcomes are typically felt on a political spectrum. It's not just a certain group of people that wants those outcomes. It's the route to get there and what the potential driving factors are that people have different opinions on the whole. So starting out with questions, who are the different stakeholders at the table? These are people that are going to be affected by whatever problem you want to solve or systems level change you want to make. What are their roles? Administrators administrate, teachers teach. We all do different things and we get outside those boundaries, but thinking about what people's roles are is really important when you really want to strategically meet a goal. That can't really be stressed enough. What is their role? And are you asking them to do something that's really outside of the bounds of their role, which people may do and can do, but that's something to think about. Are there bridges? What are the bridges from the hospital to the schools, from the churches to the houseless encampments? What are the bridges from the businesses to the people that need jobs? Where are these bridges? Where are people communicating? We hear over and over that things are siloed and people are in silos. Well, where are the lines of communication? If there are no lines of communication at all, could you be that line of communication? So that's where the humility check really comes into play, because if you are going to be that bridge, you need to let go with part of the identification of one side if you are to be a bridge type of organization or person. How could you help the bridge? Does everyone fit into a logic model? Sorry, there's a typo there. What funding sources are available for the type of project that you want to do? And so what this can lead to is basically a Venn diagram of sorts, where there may be one organization or person that thinks it should be this way, another that thinks it should be that way, but then you have some kind of middle ground. And if you can see where this middle ground happens, you could potentially have a common ground type of project. And this can be very healing. So this is a made up example of a neighborhood association that wants to protect the interests of the neighborhood on the right there. Then there's a health coalition on the left that wants to make changes to the neighborhood. And there is a clash here, an absolute clash. And the middle ground would be maybe there are dollars that support health that can support their mission that also relate to something that's actually already in the purview of the neighborhood association. So rather than taking an outside idea and trying to implement it into the neighborhood that is against it, how can we understand what the values and the goals of the neighborhood association are, and how can we maybe build a bridge to develop a project that could really meet both the criteria and both of the goals. This can't always happen, but this is just, it's really a thought experiment that absolutely can lead to actual projects that, again, can be healing for us versus them situations. Okay, thirdly, hindered by bureaucracy. You have tons of ideas and you're hitting red tape and you feel like you can't launch ideas in your workplace. So does this mean that you need to get another job? You know, we have a huge, great resignation happening and that's happening not just from bureaucracy, but from the social environment. And people are really having to make that decision. You know, people were at home during the pandemic, and if you had enough food to eat and a roof over your head and things were relatively okay being at home, you had a break from all that stuff at work. And so now that it's time to go back, do you really want to go back? And why would you? And so that's what a lot of people are thinking. So let's say you've got an okay situation at work, but you can't get things done. And so part of the back end of how we can teach about this, we can teach the sociology of organizations how to navigate bureaucracy. I remember my dad telling me as a young child, he was talking about, I asked about his education. Yes, I was obsessed with school as a little kid. And he said that he got a master's in public administration. Oh, what's that? It teaches you how to navigate bureaucracy. And I thought that sounded really interesting. How to navigate bureaucracy. Well, we all need to learn how to do that. And yes, in some cases, we need to turn the system upside down, and it's an inequitable, not good situation how the bureaucracy is. So definitely, sometimes it does take completely, you know, busting it up and starting again. But your ability to navigate those systems and to understand it is really huge. And there are ways to move projects forward that you never thought you could move because people were against it or it would take too long. And there are ways to fit it into the system. And again, I can't say this enough. Going outside the system is great too. Living off the grid and just experiencing a different life than even being in society, that's okay too. But we're talking about present day, you're in an organization, you want to move something forward and you experience a block. How can you move it forward? So questions that you can ask if you're at an organization, wherever you're at, let's say you have an idea and you want to move it forward, think about what are 3 current initiatives that are seeking to solve this problem? And could you add on to a current initiative? Is there something that you may not even think about that's already being done at your workplace that it could actually be a part of? This is not advice that everyone likes, and it's not even advice, but it's something to consider that in our society, we're so programmed to want to stand out and be different and take credit and have the idea. And being able to have it be somebody else's idea that's never served me wrong. And it's one of those things where if you are sure of your own values and integrity, and you have a mechanism for deciding if something is, you know, if it's really important to, and I'm not talking about giving other people credit where credit's due. I'm talking about starting something new versus being a part of something. And those two things they're psychologically different to some people. And if you think about, what the biggest motivator for the decision maker, and being able to, interview that decision maker about their concerns. I was talking with a group the other day that was talking about a project, and the people that were in power had all of these concerns. And so they wanted to find data to present to show that those concerns weren't valid. And that is a conflict situation that will most likely perpetuate this standstill and this conflict that they're in. But if they reframe it as, we interviewed you, we see your concerns, and this is the data that supports your concerns. In other words, we've looked into this so that you have more information, and taking one of those concerns and potentially thinking about, for example, different revenue streams for the project. I say this because cost always comes up as the barrier, and we have to be able to somehow work around that. If you want to start a new program, what are potential revenue streams? Instead of looking at it like it's not about money, it's about people, why not dabble into, are there things that we could do to generate our own revenue and be financially independent with this project, and be able to kind of kickstart it and think about the concerns of the bureaucracy or the hoops we have to go through, and think strategically how we can meet those. So getting into what this actually looks like, this could be a business plan style proposal with a value proposition and aligning data with the organizational mission. And a lot of times in education and social services and public health and lots of fields where there aren't huge budgets to invest in research and development and innovation. There's just not. And so thinking about a way to balance, again, that final outcome that you want, where people's lives are improved and how that actually happens, and to really marry that idea of return on investment and the financials with benefiting people, and being able to see that on a spectrum, totally mission driven for the people, totally all about making money, not for the people. It's a spectrum, and to be able to really work in that gray area and not be afraid to kind of bring in those other elements. So this is a throwback picture of me in our research center and a little bit about a value proposition. I'm working on a new program now in the academic setting, and we don't have any funding, and it's all about enrollment and recruitment, and a lot of the things that I'm responsible for are outside of my control. And I've had to learn this the hard way, taking on certain burdens that are not truly part of my job description, and just how exhausting it can be, and it doesn't end up working. So really thinking about the return on investment, the value proposition of a certain program that is designed to benefit, let's say, students or community members or people that don't have jobs or people that don't have homes, and think about it in a way that is really aligned with the nuts and bolts of what the concerns, what the process is for somebody else that is really the decision maker. So it's really, it can't be stressed enough to take the emotions out of it when thinking about how you can sort of fit it into the bureaucratic process that you need to, but then to connect back with the emotion, because really what will be the most successful is the thing that you're the most excited about. And so it's really balancing that, again, being mindful that pure excitement and enthusiasm is not a recipe for sustainability. It is absolutely a balance. So to sort of wrap up the last one, being hindered by yourself, how can you sustainably work towards your goals? Well, this is something that, again, we can start to address in the family, in the classroom, in the workplace. It doesn't matter where, but the earlier, the better. what are the feelings that come up when you go into the job market? That was not something that was in my PhD program. I was totally scared to death. I was scared that I wouldn't get a job. And then I was scared that I would get a job and then I would have to work so much and that would be really hard, and I couldn't just read at a coffee shop all day. It's the fears that come up. Having absolutely no container for it, it's the only thing you can do is just internalize that, and then that leads to self-doubt. It could lead to anxiety, depression, substance use and abuse, a whole host of negative consequences. So being able to talk about that, feelings that come up when you are seeking a job, your self-esteem, what's your professional self-esteem like? Do you feel proud of yourself? I mean, those are things that, in working with grad students, they go through all of those emotions and there's nothing really there to address that. So an activity that I have on the Widespread Wellness website, it's the 5-minute magic activity. It's really just the idea that you can start small, that there's nothing that's too small. One of the biggest lessons that I had to learn was to slim down my goals from 100 to 1. I mean, and by that I mean to reduce what I wanted to do by about 99%, and to realize that if you're a visionary, you're going to accomplish 1 out of every 300,000 ideas that you have, and just to deal with that and to move on. When it comes to actually sustainably working on things, connect with that higher purpose. Nothing wrong with that. What ideas do you have? What's your mental health like? Review and answer the questions on the depression scale. Are you depressed? If you are depressed, if you are feeling really, really low, do not make decisions on what skills you have. Do not make decisions on what you should do, because what needs to be addressed first is your perception and your health and your well-being and your groundedness. And it's from there that you can start to see what is possible. Think about how socially isolated you are. Think about your mission in life. And if you don't have a personal mission, something that you have an interest in, something that you used to have an interest in and you don't anymore, something that you would do as a volunteer. Connecting to that and then transitioning to something that you can do in 5 minutes, doing 5 minutes a day, doing 5 minutes a week, just to get started, just to put yourself out there a little bit. This is especially true during the pandemic when we were all so isolated, and we still are. And so your mission statement could have to do with the sustainable development goals. If you have no idea what mission you want to be a part of, check these out. That's one way of doing it. Examples of 5-minute things that you can do right now, today. You can Google nonprofits with a similar mission. I've heard a lot of people's really interesting ideas. And one of my first questions is, have you looked up if there's a place in town that does that already? You can reach out to 2 of your contacts, your old teachers. Think of how amazing it would be for your high school literature teacher to get an email that says, hey, I'm living in this city now and I'm thinking about starting a business, or I'm thinking about writing an article and trying to get it published on a blog. Tell them what you're up to. You're creating potential opportunities here. Yes, you can manifest things, but you have to be very actively participating for things to come into manifestation physically. So if you shoot out that email or you make a YouTube video like, hey, sociology majors, this is what you can do with sociology. You can analyze a population, you can develop survey questions, and you can do research, and et cetera, et cetera. Make a video. Somebody may see that video and who knows what can happen. You can update your LinkedIn tagline. Think back to the sociology major that said they were a social analyst and health advocate. That might resonate with someone that, again, may not think sociology when they think about people that they want to hire. Even updating your profile picture can be huge for your self-concept, especially after isolation. I can't stress that enough. Again, our perception is likely skewed right now. Okay, so let's review. sociology education or social science or that civics teacher in high school can produce people that want to make systems level changes. Systems changes that can occur in families, organizations, businesses, communities, societies, globally. And if you are attracted to that type of work, you may be hindered by your work environment, by your social environment, by your own psychology. And educators, coaches, mentors, bosses, colleagues, we can help each other by using these tools and other tools. I mean, you can take this and run with it. Come up with your own set of tools. This is just something to try out to bring these things into the conversation so people don't feel isolated and help people overcome these barriers in hindered idealism. And you can think of a different phrase to use. The word idealism is not going to resonate with everybody. The words systems change is not going to resonate. Don't get caught up in the words. These are just, all of this is sort of made up anyway. It's just, we're trying to find the verbiage to talk about the problems that we are suffering from right now. And you know, I stagnated for a really, really long time, and it was hard to even communicate how much I felt I was stagnating with people because, you know, they had a different perception than I did. And so you get caught up in kind of trying to explain what you're suffering from, and it can be misunderstood, or it can be obvious to the outside perspective what you need to do. And it's really, knowing what we need to do is just not enough right now. We need to really understand, you know, where these blockages are, and talking about it and reflecting on it and then taking action is how you start to loosen that. Don't think about the huge long-term vision 24/7. That is weighing you down. Just think about things in that slight shifting way where you can loosen it up a little bit, do something a little bit different that takes a couple of minutes, and then see where it leads. I'm right now recording this webinar by myself with no audience, and it's just an action to take my experience and challenges and adversity and try to transmute it into something that might, like a ping pong ball, you know, hit someone in a certain way that they think about this other person, and you never know what can happen. So that's about all from me. Thank you for your attention. I hope you got something out of this webinar. You can find me on Instagram now at Widespread Wellness LLC, and you can check out the website that I edit pretty much every day compulsively, widespreadwellness.org, just trying to create a container for resources that we can use to help each other in a way that can strategically mentor ourselves and each other to move through these challenges in this unprecedented time. You know, I had to end with that. All right. Thank you for your attention.